Hello, everyone. We are back with another interesting episode. I'm Nishit, Head of Sales and Strategic Alliances for the JPEC region, and will be your host for this series. We have Riley with us from dotdigital for this interesting discussion series on marketing automations and segmentations. So let's jump right into today's discussion. Customer segmentation done, or personalization. But then, what are the common challenges that brand come up with when it comes to segmenting their customers? Or once even the customer segmentation is done, they are finding, really hard to get that right messaging sent across to their customers. So maybe if you can share some, common challenges that the brands are facing day in, day out when it comes to utilizing this data from all these, touch points and then having those customer segmentation done.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's definitely one where there are a lot of common challenges for sure. Particularly in customers sort of earlier in the piece, with kind of going after automation as a strategy and really figuring out how they can drive value from the data that they have. And so I guess it does start with data and the different data types and how to create, logical queries out of those data types. So what we can see is brands who have big gaps in that data or haven't been collecting the data in a meaningful or logical way, or don't have the tools in place to even really be capturing it properly at all, have a really big challenge in doing this properly. It means that they do have to sort of rely on sort of very simple batch and blast emails where a generic offer is kind of offered to their entire customer base, for example. And so that's a really big challenge. So if you're not investing in the right technology to collect the data, you're really limited there. And then I think, and then beyond that, it's sort of the integration. So if you do have some of the right pieces in place, but they're actually not connected to each other. So if you have a tool that's only doing email for you, but it's not connected up to your website analytics, it's not connected up to CRM or point of sale, or even, your mobile app or other social media sources, those are all places where your customers are and you're not there with them. So you're going to have a big challenge in actually developing that content to be much more personal. And so, it's definitely an area where we often do recommend brands get a bit of help in. We can often help, but there's often third parties that can really help them connect all of those sources up. So I know Krish does a great job of that, integrating all those different data sources. And then also in that process, actually making sure that the data accuracy and quality is up to scratch as well. And, they're not sort of sending out emails to inactive accounts or mobile numbers that are missing a digit, or, names that are totally incorrect and just annoying people. So those, so those are the sort of really kind of big challenges at the beginning of the journey, for sure. And then I think beyond that, it's getting targeted and specific with the strategies that you're deploying. So as I was speaking about earlier, there's all of these different attributes that you can bring into the different segments that you're creating, and how granular you want to get in those segments. It's really pretty, amazing, like how deep you can go. So I think, with that, there's challenges that brands do face when they get into that aspect as well. So, are they actually dynamically targeting the segments in the best way that they could, or in an effective way, or bringing in the right types of data to build those segments? And then when they actually are going after those segments, are they measuring and monitoring the results to test and learn? Because if you are building a bunch of different segments and you just keep going after them with similar types of offers or whatever, like it's not necessarily going to be the best gain. Whereas if you are, if you actually working out how you're getting more personalized and more relevant to those segments, but then you're measuring and monitoring the results, you're going to have such a different outcome from that. Which brings me to, like I guess one of the sort of final sort of themes of the challenges is like the resourcing. So I think, so it's great like how far we've come with how much we can automate all of these different tasks and how much we can make that happen at scale. So we're great at that. But at the same time, there is only like a certain number of hours in the day or a certain number of employees that you have in the team. So that is another challenge that brands face is the resourcing and the ability to scale out what they've actually been building.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, and these are like the prime most kind of challenges that any brand would face when they start adapting to marketing automations. Obviously, identify the touch points where they should collect the data from. And then probably once the data is with there, obviously the other point that you mentioned is really critical when it comes to integration with third-party tools and systems. So obviously you need to make sure that those connections are intact, making sure that the data flow is really, exactly like how we want it. And then once that is done, obviously the resourcing. So if probably once for any particular brand and if they're adapting to marketing automations and customer segmentations, probably they should, look into these three areas, that would probably solve a lot of problems for them in terms of adapting and then doing that proper segmentations. Because once that proper segmentation is done, that is really important to put out the right message at the right time, as I said, right? So that covers probably, most of the things for a brand in order to adapt that. Right. And once these customer segmentation is done and we have done this personalized campaigns, how do we measure the impact of that particular campaign? Like, how do we check the efficiency of it in terms of whatever we have done or whatever personalized messages we have sent across through email or through other channels? How do we monitor that?
Yeah, definitely. So the good news is that tools like dotdigital are really good at monitoring these things. So, as we were talking about earlier, there's like so many different customer attributes that go into this. But yeah, we actually are able to feed it back to brands at, a sort of overall level, but also at a program level, campaign level, or, team level, or, parent-child accounts, all those sort of things. So so that makes it like much easier. I can't imagine how hard it must be, if you're sort of trying to measure this over, 4 or 5 different tools or sort of manually. But that
doesn't make sense for them.
Yeah, exactly right. But there's a few like metrics that are really ubiquitous to the industry, I would say. So I think the open rate is a great one. It's like a real basic one. So it gives you a good indication of how the subject line is resonating and, whether your targeting is actually effective because they're opening the email or they're not opening it. So definitely got to measure that. The click-through rate, another awesome metric, really critical. It's just basic to make sure that the segments that you're building are resonating, because that's the hope, right? Is that if you are segmenting it properly, that they're actually clicking through to the next stage, to the offer or to check out the website or whatever it is. Beyond that is the conversion rate. So the conversion rate, this is often all the other things that you're doing on your website or around that customer journey can actually influence the conversion rate. So it's absolutely critical to know that as well and be able to, measure fluctuations ongoing. Then it's a few other ones. So if you're actually sending emails, you've got to really be looking at the deliverability of the emails or the bounce rate. So if you're not hitting the customer or the prospect in their inbox, and it might be going to spam or it actually might be bouncing, and you don't know it, like that's going to be a pretty poor return on investment. So you've got to be measuring that. Unsubscribe rate's a massive one. So if you're sending out relevant, engaging content, or at least you think you are, and people are unsubscribing on it or are unsubscribing from it at a higher rate than the industry averages, for example, then that's probably like a serious consideration to reassess the strategy there.
Right.
ROI is a great one. So thinking about how much you actually are spending on these different campaigns and what the returns are. The more you're measuring this stuff, the better, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it boils down to, like the trial and error that we talked about earlier, right? When starting off. So obviously this is more towards you run a campaign, you identify the segment, you run a campaign, you put in a message, how exactly it's working, you see the metrics, and based on that, you keep on changing and modifying it and optimizing it just to make sure, we are still getting, results out of it. So the more metrics we follow, those are like really good pointers, or, email open rate, CRO, and all these tools can be really handy in order to probably, review the kind of campaigns that we are doing.
Yeah.
And then based on that, we can obviously modify them, because at the end of the day, it might work for a certain kind of segmentation done, but it might not work for another customer segment. So that's where you need to optimize it more. Or maybe there's a certain, customer segment where you need to give them a more offer or a coupon, which they can probably utilize. So yeah, that all depends upon the metrics that you follow, on the campaigns that you have done. So that is
it's so important. Like, one of the reasons that it's really important is that this space is like almost getting somewhat scientific if you think about it. So it's like art versus science, right?
Exactly.
We've had all these conversations about like we're getting really personalized with our prospects or our customers. We want to be closer to them. And we don't want to sound phony, like we want to sound really legitimate, really authentic, and all this sort of stuff, right? But at the same time, the way we get there is very scientific, because we're using all this data, we're building these segments, we're building hypotheses, we're measuring and learning, all of these types of things. So it's getting that balance. But at the same time, everyone is kind of doing that as well. So dotdigital, for example, we release a global benchmarking report around, industry averages for these type of metrics that I've just ran through, some of the kind of, top basic ones that people should consider. But it's all out there in terms of all types of third-party huge consultancies looking at this, like Accenture or McKinsey, right the way through to localized players who are assessing, the state of email in Australia or the state of marketing in general, whatever. But they give you these statistics often. And that's great for brands, because once you are measuring this and you actually are testing and learning and you have this data over a meaningful period of time, you can compare it to your peers in the market and work out, are you exceeding those averages, which you want to be trying to exceed the averages. So you're actually growing at a better rate and getting a higher ROI. So, yeah.
Right. Well, that sounds really good. Right. And then obviously, if you are monitoring this day in, day out, you get, you can define an entire roadmap of how exactly you want to, take things up in the future. And it also circles down to how exactly you are trying to grow in the next 3 years or 5 years. Yeah. Where do you want to take your brand as well? So based on the kind of campaigns that you are running, based on the kinds of data that you have compiled through all those multi-touch points that you have, that really, gives a bird's eye view where exactly, how we can embrace that, and then how we can, take your brand ahead. Thank you for tuning in today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation with Mary today. Found it really insightful. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we explore more nuances of marketing automation, segmentations, and more with Riley. Until then, take care, and thanks again for listening. Cheers.